Perhaps we're delusional about baseball. Let's talk about that. Folks, welcome to the Baseball Brewhaha. We got some fun things to talk about today, some controversy, if you will. I just finished reading a really good book, and so we're going to get into that a little bit. But Adam, how are things going?
Doing good. Made it through the new year.
Oh yeah, right. You took a
Hap-
little trip. You took a
Happy New
trip.
Year. Yeah. Happy New Year, everybody. Took
Yeah.
a little trip to San Francisco. Giants were out of town, so missed them. And the A's are in Sacramento. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, yeah. So indeed, yeah. We had a little family get together, extended family get together, and I've been battling a cold, as you can probably hear. And I stayed up with my kids, and man, just sometimes I'm like, man, is there a worse holiday for a 42-year-old than New Year's Eve? Staying up for New Year's. Oh, brother, brother, brother. But in the midst of that, I've had this week off at work. Huge thanks to my team and bosses. I got to do a lot of reading, and the first thing before we get into that, I got Adam hooked me up with a Kingdom shirt throwback. If you tuned in last week, we talked about the I got published for the first time, and my story is they titled it and linked it to the Kingdom. It's Mariners esque, but there's a whole lot more there. Go back and listen to that. We read a piece of that, and but I've been reading other books about baseball. I like reading about baseball. Surprise, shocker. Adam, have you been? I know life's kept you very busy. Have you read any good books, baseball or otherwise, recently?
The most recent reading I've been doing is going through this baseball story book that you got me that
Mm.
had the story that we read from last week. Um, And other than that, I'm doing like work reading, like education type books. Not as interesting for what we're doing here.
Yeah, yeah, probably very baseball adjacent, I would say. So, so I read. I picked up at the library this book here, "The Year of the Pitcher," and actually, this is my second go round picking up the library. First time reading it, and this, if you want to do something fun, I don't think maybe I mentioned this on the show. I can't remember. Go to the library, find the baseball section, and let your kids pick out the books for you rather than you just pick out what you think is interesting, because you end up reading things that you never would have read otherwise. It's been a good exercise for me. Good book. I highly recommend it. It's about 1968, Bob Gibson, Denny McLain, historic seasons, um, and a lot, and also kind of the cultural things that were going on in the 60s at that time. Um, Very good book, very interesting read. And at points, I felt like, boy, is the detail too much here? But we're going to get into one of his comments here, the author, in his epilogue. And this was interesting because I feel like usually when I read an epilogue, it's kind of like just a little add on chapter that's like, and, Bob Gibson is now, doing this, and Danny McLean's now doing this. And that's kind of what, and so you do get some of that. But then he brings in some big time conclusions here that really, I was like, boy,
Hmm.
you don't get this from an epilogue all the time, from a book like this. It's kind of like it was like a big essay, and he's like landing his points. And um, so I'm going to read just a short snippet because there's this really hard hitting paragraph, and then we're going to talk about it here. So, Adam, are you ready?
Buckle up, folks.
Buckle up. All right. So, context here is 1968. A lot of racial tensions going on. He's particularly talking about Detroit and some of the issues that were going on in Detroit at the time. And here was a statement that Willie Horton said that was kind of like set up as like, here were some things being said about how great it was this championship that the Tigers won in 1968. Willie Horton, who was from Detroit, proudly proclaimed, quote, "I believe that the 1968 Tigers were put here by God to heal this city." Okay, so this is sort of the framework. And here's what the author says. He says, "We want to believe that the sports we play and watch are more than just games. We want to endow them with a greater meaning, with a moral weight, to somehow justify our obsession. The joy of the game doesn't seem to be enough. Baseball is especially susceptible to this outpouring of nostalgia because of our belief that the sport in crossing generations somehow reflects a simpler age, even though we all know that our American story has never been simple." Now, Adam, we texted a little bit about this yesterday. Can you unpack some thoughts here? What are your initial thoughts on his comments?
One of the challenges here that I have with this paragraph that you just read is um, the series of assertions that don't have any that are just opinion or based on experience or that come from
Mhm.
somewhere other than sort of like hard evidence. And maybe he has something out there, but there are a series of these that like you like one layers on another and so on.
Mhm.
And so he's writing a narrative that um each of these points supports that narrative without someone uh like in a conversation someone might say, I don't know if I believe or think the same way that
Mhm.
you do about that. And one of these in particular is um this, like, we want to endow baseball or baseball games or the sport with some sort of like morality to it. um I think about it differently. Like, we as people, we are meaning makers. And so
Mhm.
of course we want to write a story about um how an event uh does something for a city, or it lifts the hearts and minds of the people of Detroit or whatever, which is, I think, what the beginning of that was with Willie Horton.
Mhm.
And then the author takes it in a different direction about morality, or it being bigger than it was in a way that's different than the way Willie Horton was talking about it. And so I uh so I'm curious about what you think about this quote,
Mhm.
just adding one other perspective that it's not, I don't think it's about morality. It's about how we make meaning of the things in our lives and how they connect to us and connect to the lives we live.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So obviously, so I've read the entire book and you haven't, so that's a little bit disadvantage for you in terms of the full context of what he's talking about. However, it's not hard to get to to really the fullness of what he's trying to cover. And as I thought about it, what it felt like was that, you know, he was correct in saying that, like, based on what he laid out, the evidence and what was going on in Detroit, in particular, that the 1968 Tigers winning the World Series didn't cure particularly the racial tensions and things that were going on in Detroit. Um, and and I don't think there's any issue just to say that. You know, I think that he laid out the evidence and basically said, look, you know, we may want to paint it. You know, these guys may want to paint it like it was a big heroic thing for the city, but at the end of the day, nothing really changed. Save for a few days of celebration, that kind of thing. And that's fine. So what's interesting though is kind of then extrapolating that to sort of all times. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
it becomes sort of like painted with a broad brush, and um, I can certainly see this because I can definitely want to feel like at times in my life that's like, well, I'm a baseball fan and like somehow watching this game or something like that means something maybe more than it really does. So I can feel that a little bit. Um, but it made me wonder if there's this kind of nuance difference between like ascribing a morality to sort of like an outcome, like this is God's team or this is, you know what I mean, like an outcome versus separating the outcome from like the inner, like the personal, like we were talking about the fact that we're meaning makers, that we make meaning of the things in our life, whether it's baseball or other things, is wondering if it was more, if you can draw the line between like when I go with my kids and I play sandlot baseball and I'm investing time in them and the kids in my community, that's very different than saying like trying to ascribe some, you know, broader cultural significance to the Seattle Mariners breaking a 21-year curse of not making the playoffs. You know, I don't know if that makes sense, but sort of like an outcome versus like the experience and the interpersonal part that baseball plays as a sort of like a um, whatever conduit. That was the word I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Conduit for this meaning making that you're talking about.
This is an interesting like conversation to have, and I think is difficult as a writer when you're writing a book and the purpose of the book isn't to talk about um, like the philosophy um, of entertainment in this
Mm,
in
yeah.
this sense in the form of baseball or even the historical impact of baseball um, on culture, on society, on a particular city,
Hmm.
on particular groups of people. There have been books written about that. And I think a disadvantage here, and perhaps where um, it's difficult as a writer, is he's sort of starting to wade into this, into those waters um, without having written a book that's for that purpose and without having space and creating space for the nuance of that conversation because
Mm,
yes, an individual game or an individual team um, perhaps doesn't have moral significance or cultural significance beyond a moment in time, but you can make an argument easily in Detroit or any other city. I mean, we experienced this in the mid 90s with the Mariners,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
the 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 thought or proposal for them to leave the city of Seattle
Mm-hmm.
to be sold and moved to Florida, like the entire, like, not the entire city literally, but the city of Seattle rallied around the Mariners, and at the same time they're winning and they make the playoffs, and they, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you can't say that those are entirely separate from one another, which is sort of what he says here, or what
Hmm.
it seems he says. And I doubt that he would make that type of blanket statement either, that they don't
Hmm.
overlap or they don't intersect, because they do. And there's been a lot written about that, and there are a lot of great books about that. I mean, you just read anything about Jackie Robinson, the integration of baseball. I mean, he was,
Hmm.
um, nearly 20 years before the Civil Rights Act. He's integrated
Hmm.
into baseball, and the impact of his journey. And and then you t- and then there are conversations happening now about the lack of black athletes in Major League Baseball.
Hmm.
So we're having cultural conversations about baseball, and what does it mean, um, culturally? What does it mean to a city, um, in just that domain within itself, let alone the economic domain, or entertainment value, or um, in any other series of things that are connected to a team, whether direct or indirect.
Yeah. 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 Those are good points. And you made a couple comments there that we're going to actually, in another episode, we're going to tackle that particular topic. There's one other thing here that he said that I thought that was interesting. Um, and I don't know where it goes, but he says in here, the joy of the game doesn't seem to be enough. Now, his context for saying this is, I don't know, maybe it's similar, but like for me, in my context, I have kids that like to play baseball, and there's sort of this, and you have kids that are playing sports, and one that's played on a select basketball team, and so on. And so you see this in the sense where it feels like it's not worth doing if you're not like the best or the champion, or you're going to play the professional or something like that. That truly the joy of the game doesn't seem to be enough. And that's something that I feel like I've been kind of working into my life and how we do things. But that was kind of an interesting statement that he made in this context as well. I don't. Do you have any initial thoughts as far as like when you heard that statement kind of fall in the context of what he's talking about?
Yeah, I mean, my initial thought is, of course, it's not enough,
Hmm.
because joy is context dependent, right? Like our lives are lived within a context that's broader than like what's in front of my face right now. And so, when he's writing about joy is not the joy of the game is not sufficient. No, it's not. Like, because where the joy comes from is
Mm,
a layered past that
mm,
has existed for however many years, and however many memories, and however many moments, and however many people and interactions and everything else that brought you to that moment. And so that's layered in, plus that moment, what's happening in the moment, plus who you're who you see yourself as now and in the future, and how that experience integrates with who you are
Hmm.
and who you see yourself
A
to
little bit.
be. So I would agree with his statement that the joy of the game doesn't seem to be enough, but I think I agree with it. The reason I agree with it is different than the way he states it.
Hmm. As you were talking about this, you were talking about the context. Like joy comes with a context. I had this thought, and I don't know if it's true, 100%, but it made me think: how much is joy like? Let's just take baseball for example. Your enjoyment of baseball related to your relationships within that context, right? So, like, I like baseball sort of. I talked about this last week. Going to Shields and holding a bat. Like, I don't need somebody to entertain me about baseball. However, all of that's within the context of growing up with you and with our dad coaching us, and in the context that we grew up in, where deep relationship was formed with baseball as a key piece of that. And so, like, people who didn't have that, or their maybe they had a relative, or let's just say a father who loved baseball but who was abusive to them, like, they're not going to have good memories of baseball. Like, baseball is not going to be joyful. And so, in that sort of context, the joy of the game doesn't seem to be enough. Well, correct, because, like, if you are like in that Detroit context, you're at odds with the people around you. You might go, "Yay, team won." For a short time, they're saying "Yay" over here. These people I don't like also say "Yay," so we kind of yay together. But at the end of the day, there's no relationship. How can there be joy? Does that make sense? Like, I feel like joy more than maybe I've pictured or put together is so relational that if there is no relationship, you in that particular context, how can you have joy?
Yeah, well, and I think this is where some of the conversation about like the cultural significance of like a sport or a sports team can you can think about it in some different ways, like this person that you are having tension with, you both have a positive experience together with something. It just happens
Hmm.
to be the Detroit Tigers,
Hmm.
and now you can start building a bridge. The Tigers
Hmm.
aren't the actual bridge where any meaningful work is going to happen,
Hmm.
but it can be a bridge or a conduit or a connection point
Yeah.
where someone um, could maybe look at someone who's different from them and say, "Oh, maybe we're not so different,"
Yeah.
or
Hmm.
maybe you know maybe we can share this space together in a way that brings us both joy. And what could that look like in a different space? And so this is where you can like the game, an individual game. It's not about an individual game or an individual team or a player or an event.
Hmm.
It's about what can happen, a connection that can be formed, but then it's meaningless if the connection isn't then cultivated
Yeah.
beyond that. It would have to move beyond the Tigers winning the World Series, and it doesn't, because if that's your only bond, then they win the World Series and then they don't play again for 6 months, and then you don't talk for at least 6 months.
Yeah, this has been fun to talk about. And if you're listening, you go back and listen to, sorry we don't have it here to read for you, but if you don't go back and listen, maybe there's something that he said, that this author said, that stuck out to you, that you want some thoughts on, or you want to share some thoughts on. But these are fun. These are fun conversations to have, and I love that the author, his last name is Papu, I think is how you pronounce it, Pappu. And I love that he came right out with some big, hard hitting comments and statements. It makes it really fun to engage what otherwise would have been like, hey, that was a good book, and move on to the next thing. So I've been thinking about them, and Adam and I have been thinking about talking about it. So it's a lot of fun in that context.
And thanks to the author for writing and writing his thoughts and his ideas, and perhaps I would argue that authors want their work to be discussed, and they want their work to live on with the readers who are interested in what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we actually have more to come of things that he wrote and said that I think are really fascinating topics to continue on. So we will do that. And well, in the spirit of having some um, differing opinions here, I've got a pack of Donruss 1992. Now, why does that have differing opinions? I really like Donruss 92. It's super simple and plain. Adam doesn't like it. He made some disparaging comments
It's
in prior episodes. Do you care to recant, or are you gonna stay?
it's a pretty boring set. I
What you just stand on that?
I'm standing on it. I mean,
Okay.
there's the only thing that remains for me about that set would be nostalgia, and
Yeah.
there's some of that. But when we're talking about, good rookies and inserts and interesting design, photography, all of it is not it's not there.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, you can get a Griffey, so that counts for something.
So, yeah, it does. You could get a Griffey.
So there are definitely sets that I like more. Donruss 92, this is right in our heyday, as far as collecting cards. Not the most inspiring, but very affordable. A very
Yeah.
affordable set. So we're gonna see if maybe to this pack will kind of determine, should we give it some more love or should we not? So we can determine that. Well, and we're not off to a good start here with Bill Sampin,
Mm-hmm.
but Colorado Buffs fans, right in my neighborhood. This is right up the alley, of course. It's Deion Sanders, baby.
How about that?
Coach Prime. Coach Prime. Let's go. Then the excitement continues with one Anthony Telford. Uh, Kevin Seitzer, new Mariners hitting coach. There we go.
Yeah.
Scott Cooper. I mean, look at that action. Greg Cadaret. Let's go. What are we doing? What is this pack doing to me? I'm
What
trying
are
to
we
give
doing?
I'm trying to give us some love, and it gives me this business. Anthony Telford again.
See?
What are we doing? Um, three make no hitter history. Pena, Merker, and Wohlers.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever.
Of the no hitters,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps the most uninspiring no hitter fits perfectly in Donruss 92.
Yeah. Yes, that's fair. Joe Hesketh. Boy, this is wow. Denny Nagel. Andy Mota. Okay. Milt Hill. Wow, Adam,
Mhm. Yeah, I nailed
you
it.
you
Nailed
nailed
it.
Bob Patterson.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. We got a makeup.
We got a redeemer here.
We got a redeemer. Randy Johnson,
There we go.
Diamond King. That
Okay.
I feel like I've never seen this card before, and that's a beauty.
I will say, after you pulled that up right there, that's one of the best Diamond King designs, and with the
Yeah,
glossy finish there, I will say they nailed it on the Diamond Kings.
yeah. I agree with that. I had forgotten what the Diamond Kings look like in this set, and this is pretty money right there.
Yeah.
And then of course we finish it with another banger, Darren John Chapin. There we go. Well, we got Prime and we got Randy Johnson. That's a sick card right there. Actually, I really
Yeah.
like that card. So, boom. Well, Adam, that's gonna do it again for us. Any parting comments here?
I'm open to arguments from our fans about why I should be inspired by Donruss 92 but
Mm-hmm.
the Diamond King design cannot be your argument.
Because you've already conceded that it was on point. It was
Yeah.
like I don't know, it was like somebody was tasked with like you had two separate teams
Yeah.
and you had Jimmy the Go Getter was doing the Diamond Kings, and you had Fred, you know, overeating Fred, like, gotta
Or
toss something in.
maybe it was the same person and they used up all their creative juices on the Diamond King.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, blue and white. That's pretty good.
It was some
Who doesn't like blue? That's most people's favorite color, isn't it? Let's go with that. Oh, anyway, well, thanks for hanging with us, folks. Hope your New Year's off to a good start. Always is here in baseball land, and we look forward to talking with you next time.